Hi, my name's Chloe and I'm making this video how to get started with stand-up comedy. I'm making this for anyone who has been tempted to try stand-up comedy but feels a little bit intimidated or doesn't quite know where to start.
My stand-up experience.
For some context, I've been doing stand-up comedy for almost 6 years now. The first time I ever got on stage and did stand-up comedy was actually in Shanghai in 2017 when I was 21 years old. I went to Shanghai and was living there for 3 months over the summer. Before my senior year of college, I was teaching English and doing some odd jobs. I didn't go there with any type of program. I just went on a tourist visa, kind of illegally. I was totally on my own, and I spent a lot of time that summer by myself, pretty homesick, in parks, just journaling. And then in August, towards the end of my time in Shanghai, I got stood up on a Tinder date, and I ended up going to a comedy club that was in an international neighborhood, so it was in English. It was run by an Australian man, and it had a lot of expats and European tourists, and some Chinese natives who were doing stand-up in English. So I went to the open mic, I watched it, I thought, wow, I think I could do this. And I went home and went through my journal and everything I'd written over the past 3 months and basically came up with a 5-minute stand-up set based on that. And then the next night I went back to the open mic, signed up, and got on stage for the first time. I really liked stand-up comedy before that. I spent a lot of time listening to it and watching it, never with the intention that I was going to try it myself. I think I always was funny and gravitated towards hobbies and activities that allowed me to express myself in that way. Like as a kid, I filmed a lot of videos and edited them. I made claymations. I always was drawing cartoons. So humor was something that was not new to me. So then after I got on stage that one time in Shanghai, I went back to the States. For pretty much my senior year of college, I was doing stand-up, but really, really lightly. I was just going like once a week. My friends would come and support. It was a very friendly, warm, soft launch into the world of stand-up. Once I left college, I moved to San Francisco, and that's when I really got into it. So I would say I first went on stage in August of 2017, but I really didn't start intensely pursuing stand-up until August of 2018. And by that, I mean I was going to open mics at least 5 times a week, realistically closer to like 8 to 10 times a week. I was hitting a lot of mics every single week, very consistently. And I did stand-up comedy in San Francisco for 4 years, and now I'm living in Chicago. I've been here for almost a year. I would say I get booked on about 10 to 12 shows a month. It really depends. And nights that I'm not booked on shows, I either stay home and write, or I go to open mics and work on new material in front of other comics. So those are my qualifications. Of course, there are many more experienced and better stand-up comedians than me, but they're not making this video for you, and I am, so that's cool.
Who should try stand-up?
Okay, so who should try stand-up comedy? Really, anyone who has the desire to should go for it, in my opinion. If you're someone who's always been a fan of stand-up comedy, you love the art form, you've always been curious to try it for yourself, go for it. If you're someone who's experimenting with finding a creative outlet and stand-up comedy is one of the options, go for it. If you're working through something difficult in your life right now and writing jokes about it is cathartic to you, go for it. You do not need to pursue stand-up comedy with the intent of being a full-time, famous stand-up comedian. People do things like painting without the intention of getting their paintings in a museum one day. They just do it because they enjoy it and they want a way to express themselves creatively. You can treat stand-up comedy and going to open mics for stand-up comedy like that. If you're someone who's watching this video with the intention of pursuing stand-up comedy very seriously and making a career out of it, you have to start somewhere, and this video is going to cover a lot of stuff that will be helpful to you too.
Who should not try stand-up?
People who should not do stand-up comedy, and this is coming from my personal experience of going to open mics and being in the scene for a while, are those who lost a bet or lost their fantasy football league, and the punishment for losing is to go to an open mic and get on stage. Let me rephrase that. If you're one of those people who's always loved stand-up comedy and you've always wanted to try it, and you losing your fantasy football league is the catalyst for you to get on stage for the first time, and you take it seriously and you get up there with jokes that you wrote, cool, great, go for it. If you are not one of those people, if you're just going because you were dared to or you lost your fantasy football league and you actually don't put any time or thought into the material, you go with your buddies, it's all a big joke. You get drunk and you go on stage and you're like, oh yeah, I'm only here because I lost my fantasy football league and Dan made me do this. Fuck you, Dan. That happens every single year. I go to mics and I see that guy get up. Remember that you are in that room with other comedians like myself who, for example, worked a full day, 9 to 5 in an office, and then hopped on their bike and hit one open mic and then another open mic and then a third open mic, and they're sitting there waiting to get 4 minutes on stage to work on their material, and it's 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night and they're exhausted and they're taking it really seriously and you go up there and you're wasting their time and making a big joke out of it, don't be that guy. We all hate that guy. The only reason I'm taking the time to say this right now is because I see it happen every single year, specifically after fantasy football's over. It's so annoying.
When you start stand-up, this is your number one priority.
If you are serious about stand-up comedy and you are planning on being in it for the long run, when you first start, getting on stage is the most important thing. You need to get on stage as much as you can. It is your responsibility to find an open mic almost every night of the week and get up there. It's like going to the gym. You're not going to go to the gym once or twice and be like, oh great, I'm in shape now. You need to go consistently and make it part of your life. It is definitely a grind. It is very tiring. There are a lot of times where you're going to be sitting in a dark dive bar wishing you weren't there. Being comfortable on stage is a skill in of itself, and you're only going to get better at that skill by getting more stage time. It took me about 4 years to actually feel comfortable on stage. About 4 years in, people started commenting to me, oh, you seem really comfortable on stage. And I felt it too. I was starting to feel more comfortable on stage. And I didn't realize until then that I hadn't felt comfortable, which is crazy. When I started doing stand-up comedy, if someone said to me, hey, Chloe, you're not going to actually have good stage presence until 4 years from now, I'd have been like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to keep hacking away at this for 4 years. There are no shortcuts with stage time. For your first 2 years of stand-up, I would say getting on stage is the number one priority.
Disclaimer, stand-up is hard.
I would say it's pretty universally agreed that stand-up is the most difficult form of comedy, if not one of the most difficult art forms in general. When you first start, you're preparing to climb this giant mountain. You really can't let yourself get overwhelmed by that, so you have to put these blinders on and just do it. It is a long journey. I'm 6 years in and I feel like I still don't know anything, which I probably shouldn't be saying in my own YouTube video about how to get started with stand-up. Ignore that. I know everything. I'm a genius. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.
How do open mics work?
All right, now how do open mics work? Pretty much every city, town, county, etc. has a Facebook page or a website designated for the general comedy scene. So for example, in San Francisco, it's called Bacon, Bay Area Comedy Network. In Chicago, it is the Chicago Comedy Scene. Denver has a website, I think it's like 801 or 808 or something like that. So just start Googling around and you should be able to find kind of a central hub. And then within that, there should be a place where you can find all of the open mics listed out. This is the Chicago Open Mic Excel sheet. It is in the Chicago Comedy Scene Facebook page. You can also find it by Googling it. I have it bookmarked now. Chicago obviously is a huge comedy scene, so there are a lot of different options. Let's take a look at Cole's Bar on Wednesday night. It says the name of the bar. It says the name of the mic. It says here that the sign up is at 8:15 and the mic starts at 9. This means that the list is going to go out at 8:15 for you to write your name down. And then the mic isn't going to actually start until 9. Now, a lot of comedians will get there way before the list goes out because they are going to wait around and they will know that when the list comes out, they've been waiting there for the longest, and so they'll be able to put their name out first. I know from personal experience that this mic is very, very popular, so getting there at 7:30 might even still be too late to get a reasonable spot on the list. It's up to you to be assertive and make sure when the list goes out, you jostle your way to the right part of the line so that you get put on the list in the order that you actually came to the bar. Some mics will allow you to sign up online ahead of time. Some mics ask you to put your name in and then they do like a bucket system so that whatever order you came in, it doesn't really matter. They'll just choose at random. Some mics cap the list at a certain number so that they don't go too late. Some mics go until every single person gets up. I would recommend finding an open mic you want to go to and then looking at the venue, whatever bar or restaurant it's hosted at, and checking their Instagram, checking their website, maybe calling in advance to make sure it's still going to happen. Sometimes they get canceled, sometimes the times change. Now, can you sweet talk the host into putting you a little bit earlier on the list? Especially when you're a new comic, you should not go to open mics expecting to get any type of special treatment. If you keep going back to that mic, if you become friends of the room, if you bring some friends to be audience members, if you always make sure you buy a drink and tip the bartender, then I would say you could start to maybe be a little more comfortable asking for special treatment. When I was about 2.5, 3 years into stand-up, I started producing a lot of shows. I produced a monthly show and then I started producing a weekly show, which means I was putting on the show, I was selling the tickets, I was filling the seats with audience members, and I was booking the lineup. So I was giving a lot of comedians in the scene stage time. Because of that, more people started to know me, and when I went to mics, they usually would let me go on the list, even if I didn't go there super early to sign up. But that was, again, like 3 years into stand-up. I had kind of paid my dues already, and I was putting in a lot of work to produce these shows. I was also careful not to abuse that because I remembered being a new comic, and waiting in a room for hours and seeing some other hotshot comic cut the line and being so angry about it. That sucks. Being respectful of the room, being respectful of others, and being really nice to the host is important. Don't be a dick. Number one priority, get stage time. Number two priority, don't be a dick.
Coming up with jokes.
Let's say you found your city's comedy Facebook page or website and you found a mic that you want to go to 2 weeks from now on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock at XYZ bar. How are you going to prepare for that? This is the big thing. If you skipped everything else and came to this section of the video, welcome. We're happy to have you. You missed me saying don't be a dick, but that's about it. If you're watching this video and you have just an inkling of desire to do stand-up comedy, I would bet that in your notes app on your phone, you have lists of ideas that you think would make funny jokes, things that you said in conversation that people said, oh my God, that's so funny, or high thoughts or funny stories that you want to try writing. That's great. That is a fantastic place to start. Good for you. If you don't have something like that, I would say start trying to gather something like that. Just start thinking about that kind of stuff. What are some funny things that you've noticed? What are some funny things that came up in conversations? What are some questions that you've had? The premise is kind of like the main idea of the joke. I think of my premises a lot of times as like a thesis statement. I'm just going to spitball some premises right now. So here we go. I am turning into my mother. Technology is ruining everything. If I ran for president, my platform would be. What if I wrote a porn? What would that look like? In terms of dating, what's my type? How am I trying to be a better person? What's one of my biggest regrets in life? Beanbag chairs are the best chair. The problem with men is, I don't know. You can come up with a premise that on its own is funny and interesting, but when you get up on stage and you say just that, if it's not actually a joke, it probably won't get a laugh. So take a premise and then you're gonna have to develop it into the joke. The very basic joke structure, and you probably already know this, is setup, punchline. The setup is the context, and then the punchline is usually something unexpected. You're building tension and then you're breaking the tension. When I first started, the advice that I got was that it should be no more than 20 words to the punchline. So you get 20 words and then it should be the punchline. Obviously, that's a very tight parameter to work with, but when you're first starting, that's a good guideline. A lot of people go to their first open mic with a funny story. I would generally advise you against doing that. Stories are hard. I really struggle with stories even today. A lot of people start telling a story on stage and it ends up being a you had to be there type story. If you really want to try telling a story at one of your first open mics, I would recommend chunking it up into a bunch of little pieces and treating each of those as their individual jokes. So making sure that there is still 20 words, punchline, 20 words, punchline, 20 words, punchline, okay? Don't just make it this long, rambling thing.
The writing process.
Once you've gathered a handful of premises, I would advise you to sit down and actually write the jokes. Don't expect to go on stage, say a funny premise, and then just freeball the rest of it. Sometimes it works out, but odds are it's not going to. I recommend physically writing in a notebook on paper. When you're writing by hand, you are naturally going to make things more concise to make it less work for yourself. When I'm writing by hand, I make everything a lot shorter and tighter than I would if I were typing. I also like writing by hand because it's a little bit slower. So even if I don't know how the sentence is going to end, as I'm writing it, I'm giving my brain time to figure it out. I like starting by hand and then typing it up later. Once I type it up, it's easier for me to edit and visualize it. Comics have made fun of me for my process, which I think is pretty lame. I'm probably going to be more successful than them. So writing also is a practice. When you first sit down and look at a blank sheet of paper, it is really intimidating. Just like anything else, you have to do the practice of it to get comfortable with it. A few years ago, I was struggling with writer's block, so what I did to overcome that was whenever I sat down to write, I'd usually start by writing a letter to my grandma, and that was like my warm-up activity. You could start by writing a letter to yourself, you could just journal about your day, kind of loosen yourself up, and then go into writing the jokes. But just remember that the practice of doing it is more important than the final outcome. That's the general rule of thumb with any type of creative practice. You just have to do it. Don't expect it to be perfect, just mess around with it and keep doing it. And have fun with it, hopefully.
Practicing your set.
Okay, so after you've written some stuff out, either typed or handwritten, I would recommend practicing it to yourself. You can practice in front of the mirror, or you can set up your phone on a tripod and record yourself. I personally like to practice in my living room. I imagine there's some people sitting on my couch, and then usually I'll take a bottle of Pam, like spray stuff, and I use it as a fake microphone, and I run through my set at least 3 times. When you're preparing for your first open mic, I think you should have your set down without looking at paper, but not too perfect, if that makes sense. Make sure you remember the funny parts, and then everything else, try to memorize as best as you can, but also don't get too caught up on it. If you get up on stage and you get your set about 70% right, but you're having fun with it and you're loose, that is going to be way better than if you get word for word absolutely 100% of your set correct, but you're stiff and scared the whole time. That's not fun to watch. From my experience, memorizing something that you wrote yourself is a lot easier than memorizing something someone else wrote. So you have that working for you.
How to enhance your set.
Besides the actual writing, the things that are most important when you go on stage, from my experience, are energy. Bring energy, especially at an open mic. People are tired. People probably aren't going to be paying much attention to you. If you go up there and you're like, pow, that's so much more fun for everyone. If pow energy isn't really your style or who you are as a person, that's totally fine too. Whatever your authentic energy is, really tap into it and then try to dial it up like 200% or 500% or even 1,000% if you will. Also, act outs are really fun. Think of an act out as a show, not tell moment, right? You can drop into a character, you can use your body, you can use your voice, and you can really enhance your set through it. Especially as a newer comic, people are going to really, I think, admire that. If act outs are scary to you, also, that's totally understandable. I agree. If you want to play around with an act out, I say be bold and go for it, but just be prepared to fully commit to it if you can. The commitment is probably the scariest part. This last point's kind of cliche, but confidence is huge. If you go on stage and you fake it till you make it and you act very confident and comfortable, that versus not being confident is like night and day. There are quite a few comedians who don't write very good jokes, who don't have very original premises, but when they get on stage, they have so much confidence and so much energy, they really sell it to the audience. If you're scared and you're stuttering and you're getting caught up on every single individual word of your set, that's pretty hard to watch. Sorry. You might get some pity laughs, but it's cringy. And if that is you, don't beat yourself up over it. If you have a tough first set, don't let that stop you from trying it again. Stand-up is really hard, and everyone you've seen be great at stand-up sucked when they started. They'll be the first ones to tell you. I was pretty bad when I started, but I had a lot of energy and I was cute, so people were nice to me.
Watching stand-up inspiration.
Before I ever started performing, I watched and listened to a ton of stand-up. Now that I've been doing it for a while and I watch live stand-up comedy almost every single night of the week because I'm at shows and I'm at open mics, I really have a hard time watching professionally produced stand-up, on Netflix, on YouTube, whatever. I just don't really enjoy it as much as I used to. I kind of hyper-analyze it, and also I fear that it's going to mess with my writing process. If I'm watching a top-tier, super professional comedian do their stand-up special on Netflix, and they have a joke about mittens, and I've been trying to write a joke about mittens for the past few weeks, I'll probably be like, oh, well, they just nailed that joke about mittens. There's nothing else more you can say about mittens, and I'll give up on that bit. But that's not true. The beautiful thing about comedy is that there's so many different ways to go about it. But yeah, you're probably here watching this because you love watching stand-up comedy and you love listening to it. Here's your homework as a newer comedian. I would recommend finding 3 of your favorite comedians, and then of those 3 comedians, find 1 or 2 bits for each of them that you really like. Now turn that on the TV, and then while you're watching them, take a physical piece of paper and a pen, yes, a pen, and hand write a transcription of their bit. Doesn't have to be the whole 1-hour special, but if you want to do that, go for it. It's a really good exercise to do. It'll help you look at their joke structure in a more analytical way. Hopefully it'll help you with your own writing process. It's something I should do more often now, but I don't have a TV, so feel free to use my bits on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube for that transcription homework. Maybe you'll learn a thing or two. I'm kidding. That's very self-indulgent. Maybe do like Dave Chappelle. Go to live shows. Go to shows in your city, in your town, whatever, and watch local stand-up comedians. I think part of the magic of stand-up comedy is when it's live and you're in that room. It's like this beautiful social experiment everyone's part of.
Cancel culture.
Cancel culture. People say, can you joke about anything? I would say for comedy, most stuff is on the table. As long as you make sure it's funny enough to justify how ignorant, racist, or misogynistic it is going to make you seem. With comedy, there is higher risk, higher reward, but as a newer comedian, who doesn't have necessarily the sharpest skill set, I would say be careful. That's it. I'm not censoring anyone, but I have been in plenty of rooms where a comedian, specifically a white male comedian, has gone on stage and said something awful that was not funny at all, and everyone hated them. Don't be that person. There always has to be a butt of the joke, and if it's you, that's always safe. I would say don't be scared to tackle heavier topics, but don't make marginalized people the butt of the joke. I think a good test is, would you be willing to post it on LinkedIn? You know what people won't cancel you for? Being vulnerable, being interesting, being original. Those are very important things to comedy. Shock value on its own will not make a joke good, but it will ruin the energy of the room and make all the other comics hate you. Do you want that? Is it worth it? Would you be willing to post it on LinkedIn? Think about it.
Being a woman in comedy.
Being a woman in comedy means you will very often go to open mics and be one of the only, if not the only woman in the room. Even in 2023, in a major city like Chicago, that happened to me last week. Comedy is not male dominated because men are inherently funnier than women. It's just male dominated because they're loud and obnoxious and barred women from doing comedy for so long. If you're a woman who goes to an open mic and you feel like you don't belong there, or you're intimidated to go to your first open mic, just ignore that. You do belong there. Comedy needs more female voices. Be brave. Don't let the guys push you around. Fuck them. But not literally. Don't date other comics. Don't sleep with them. Please learn from my mistakes. You'll be happier for it.
Authenticity in comedy.
When you're at an open mic, the largest challenge is getting people's attention, right? Because they are in their own heads. They're thinking about their sets. They're anticipating going on stage. They're really not paying attention to you. They're not a real audience. So what I realized as a young female comic in a room full of male comedians, the thing that got their attention were things that were crude and kind of degrading to myself. Anything sexual. Those got a lot of laughs at open mics. And then I'd go, oh, okay, those are good jokes. And then when I started getting booked on real shows, I would tell those jokes in front of real audiences, and the audience could tell that it wasn't my authentic self, which was totally fair. I guess the thing I wish I learned sooner was that I should write about what I want to write about. Try to get a laugh at the open mic for sure, that's why you're there, but their opinion is not the end-all be-all of if your comedy is funny or not.
Online presence / social media.
Oh my God, social media and online presence. There's always been the expectation that stand-up comedians are going to market themselves. But now there's this idea that you need to go viral on Instagram, you need to go viral on TikTok. This is my opinion, but if you are a newer comedian, within your first 1 to 2 years, I would say don't really worry that much about posting clips online. As a newer comedian, there's such a steep learning curve with stage presence, with writing, with networking, with all of that. Your focus should be honing your craft. If you want to record your set when you're first starting, you should be recording it for you so you can watch it back and improve your bits. If you want to put stuff online so people can like it and follow you and whatever, that's cool. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that that whole culture and expectation is like new as of 2 years ago. So if it's not your natural instinct to do that, don't feel bad about it. I don't post a lot of clips online, even though I'm on shows plenty. I have lots of footage that I could post, but then I watch it and I know that I could have delivered the joke better. So I don't want to put it online and put it out in front of people before it's actually ready.
Other tips for your first mic.
Clearly I've been filming so long I ran out of daylight. That's why the lighting is weird. Okay, other tips for preparing for your first open mic. Pack a snack, or at least make sure you don't go on an empty stomach. Have a couple drinks to ease your nerves, but try not to get sloshed. Tip the bartender, be polite to the host, be friendly to everyone in general, don't make a bad first impression. Bring a friend for some encouragement, they'll laugh no matter what you say. Record your set visually or just the audio of it. It's really bad form to leave right after your set. Try to stay till the end, or at the very least, stay for a few comics after you.
When to your first mic. Here are next steps.
So after you go to your first open mic, what are the next steps? I would say if you are someone who's seriously pursuing stand-up comedy, think about what your goals are. If you're looking to get booked on shows, you're going to need to commit to going to open mics for at least a few months. I think a good goal would be to try to get a tight 5-minute clip within your first 6 months to year of starting stand-up. Once you have a 5-minute clip, you'll be able to send that out to people who book shows, and hopefully they'll give you a spot on a stage in a room with a real audience. Getting booked is a whole thing. So when you're new, I would say make sure you go to mics, Try to stay till the end. Introduce yourself to other comics. Walk up to them and say, hey, I really enjoyed your set. I'd love to come see you perform at a real show sometime. Do you have an Instagram handle I can follow you? Go to shows just to watch and support. And then once you're there, make sure you introduce yourselves to the producer and say, hey, my name's blah, blah, blah. I'm a new comic and I would love to be considered for one of your lineups at some point. They'll probably say something like, great, send me a clip. Sometimes bookers will watch your clip and say, hey, you're not ready quite yet, but send us another clip in 6 months and we'll see if we can get you on. Write as much as you can. Write. You will not sit down and write just a perfect joke and that's it. You have to write a lot. Always come up with new ideas, test them out, challenge yourself to come up with new premises, look at jokes in different ways, flip them around, whatever.
The audience and you.
The audience is dumb, but the audience is also smart. And I mean that the audience is dumb because they don't know what your punchline is. So you can't jump from A to Z. You have to kind of walk them through it. You might think that you're spelling things out a little too much, but remember that audiences are hearing everything you're saying for the first time. Now, audiences are smart in the way that I mentioned earlier. They can tell when you're not being your authentic self. Audiences pick up on stuff like that, even if it's just subconsciously. If you are scared on stage, they will pick up on that and they will feel nervous for you and tighten up. In some ways, don't overestimate the audience, but also don't underestimate them at the same time. The audiences want to be there. They want to laugh. They made the effort to come out to the show. They bought drinks. They're sitting there. They're happy. They're relaxed. They're ready to be entertained. So give them all you've got. I think it's kind of disrespectful to the audience if you go up on stage and you don't give them all the energy you can and you don't really try your best.
The comedy scene and you.
I would say the entertainment industry, and stand-up specifically, tends to attract a type of person that might have some inner demons they're dealing with. They might have some substance abuse issues. They might be someone who is a little bit broken inside and is therefore seeking validation from an audience. By no means is every comedian like this. I'm just saying that stand-up comedy is kind of a hotbed for that kind of personality. So be careful. People present themselves one way and then they'll show their true colors later on. You just want to make sure you're watching out for yourself. You'll make friends in the comedy community. That's a huge benefit of it. That's partially why I got so into stand-up, because when I first moved to San Francisco, I didn't really have any friends. So I went to open mics and I made a lot of friends, and it was a nice social outlet for me as well as a creative one. That being said, you are your number one advocate. People are not necessarily going to give you the benefit of the doubt. People do not owe you anything. A lot of people will want you to fail, because if you fail, that means more stage time for them. So just make sure you are your number one fan. Make sure you are advocating for yourself. Stand-up comedy is so tough because it is really a solo art. You are writing comedy for yourself and then you're getting up on stage and you're performing it by yourself. That's partially why it's so hard. That's partially why it's so scary. That's partially why it's so respectable too. It takes balls.
Lessons I've learned from stand-up.
And lastly, things that I've learned in stand-up in general. First of all, growth is not linear. There are so many layers to stand-up comedy. So you're going to feel like you're improving a lot. There's a steep learning curve, and then you're going to kind of plateau. And then you'll probably have some rough shows. For me, I have a bumpy few weeks at a time where I have writer's block or I kind of bomb a bit. And usually that's kind of a growing pain that I'm going through, and then I can feel myself getting better. It goes in iterations. The first thing I think I really noticed myself improving at was writing. And then I noticed I was starting to improve with my stage presence and confidence in general. And then I was getting better at hosting, which is its own skill in of itself. And now I feel like I'm really working on using my body and taking up space on stage. That's something that I've never really messed around with much. And I think that's kind of like the next hill of the mountain of stand-up comedy that I'm climbing. I think the key things are consistency, originality, energy, confidence, vulnerability. Yeah. Bombing is not the end of the world. It will feel like it's the end of the world, but it's not. You'll get over it. Your stand-up won't be for everyone, and that's okay. In fact, it's great. You don't want your stand-up to be for everyone. That means your stand-up is very watered down and generic. As you grow as a comedian and find your voice, your audience will also find you, if that makes sense. For me, stand-up comedy has helped me with public speaking, obviously. It's helped me learn a lot of interpersonal communication skills. It's definitely helped me with my confidence. It's helped me handle rejection. I genuinely do not know what I would be doing today without stand-up comedy. Fall in love with the practice and then see what comes of it. That's it. I am very excited for you to try stand-up comedy. I hope you're excited too. I hope you found this video at least a little bit helpful. If Feel free to follow me on any of my social media platforms, and if you go to your first open mic, comment below. Let us know how it went. I would love to hear your feedback. Stay funny. Peace out.